Welcome back to Unheard Stories, your go-to place for the most jaw-dropping, heart-wrenching, and downright crazy cheating stories that'll leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust. Before we dive into today's wild tale, I want to know, where are you all from? Drop a comment below and let me know your city or country. I love hearing from all of you, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you never miss a story. Trust me, you don't want to miss what we have in store. Now, let me ask you, what happens when the person you trust the most, the one you think would never betray you, does the unthinkable? And what if that betrayal leads to a revenge so perfect, so satisfying, that it'll make you cheer for the person you least expected to? Well, get ready, because today we're diving into the story of Jade Mitchell, a woman who thought she could get away with everything. But little did she know, her lies would lead to a payback like nothing she'd ever imagined. Stick around, because this story is about to get real fast. Jade Mitchell had always been a woman in control. In her late 20s, she was the type of person who excelled at everything she did, always the first to arrive at the office and the last to leave. As a corporate manager at one of the most prestigious firms in the city, she had worked tirelessly to get where she was. Her colleagues admired her sharp mind, her ambition, and her ability to juggle a demanding career while maintaining a picture-perfect image. But behind her flawless exterior, Jade had a secret, one that she'd been hiding from her boyfriend, Eli Carter, for months. Eli, in contrast, was a creative soul, a freelance writer who lived a quieter life than Jade. He worked from home, spending his days in front of a laptop, weaving words into stories that no one ever read. He didn't have the same drive as Jade. His world was smaller, more laid-back. But Eli was deeply in love with Jade. Their relationship had started 3 years ago, when he was drawn to her confident demeanor and sparkling eyes. He admired her ambition and the way she carried herself, always looking ahead, never slowing down. In the beginning, things had been perfect. They'd spent weekends together, enjoying long walks through the park, watching movies late into the night, talking about their dreams for the future. But as the months passed, Jade's career consumed her more and more. She would leave the apartment early in the morning, often returning late, her mind consumed by work. Eli, ever the patient partner, told himself that it was just a phase. She was dedicated to her job, and once things calmed down, they would go back to the way things were. But deep down, he began to sense something was off. Jade's emotional distance was becoming harder to ignore. When she was home, she wasn't truly present. She was lost in her phone, glued to her emails, her mind miles away from the quiet apartment they shared. Eli couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, had taken her attention. Then there was Cole Walker. Cole was everything Eli wasn't: charming, successful, and confident. He was the kind of man who commanded attention the moment he entered a room. Jade met him at a corporate event, an affair she'd reluctantly attended, but one that would change everything. He was tall, with an easy smile and eyes that seemed to understand her in a way Eli never did. They struck up a conversation, and before long, Jade found herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't felt in years. At first, it was innocent. A few text messages, a quick coffee here and there. But what started as an escape from the monotony of her routine soon turned into something far more dangerous. The emotional void she had felt with Eli seemed to disappear when she was with Cole. He listened to her. He made her feel alive again. What started as a harmless fling soon spiraled into a full-blown affair. Jade told herself it was just a moment of weakness, nothing serious. She justified it by blaming Eli, telling herself he didn't care enough to meet her needs. But in reality, she knew she was crossing a line, and somewhere deep inside, she knew she would eventually pay the price. Meanwhile, Eli had no idea. He still believed that Jade was the same woman he had fallen for, the woman who would curl up on the couch with him after a long day and talk about their future together. But the truth was, Jade's future didn't include him anymore. And as the affair with Cole grew more intense, Eli's quiet suspicions started to bubble to the surface. The breaking point came on a seemingly normal Sunday afternoon. Jade had been spending the day with Cole, their stolen time together feeling like the only part of her life that made sense anymore. But as she left Cole's apartment, She forgot one crucial thing: her phone. Eli, concerned after a long day of silence, decided to check on her. He called her phone several times, but there was no answer. Something about that felt off. He needed to know where she was, so he grabbed her phone, intent on finding out if everything was okay. What he found wasn't okay. When he unlocked her phone, his heart dropped. There, in full view, were the messages, the intimate texts, the flirty photos, the late-night conversations with Cole, each one more personal, more damning than the last. The words that hit hardest weren't the photos or the messages, but the fact that Jade had been planning their future together, with someone else. Eli's hands shook as he scrolled through the texts, the pieces of the life he thought he had unraveling with each swipe. He confronted Jade as soon as she walked through the door, the rage building up inside him. "Jade," he said, his voice low but shaking. "What is this? Tell me this isn't happening." Jade froze. For a moment, she looked like a deer caught in the headlights, her face pale. She tried to brush it off, blaming stress, work, anything to deny the truth. But Eli wasn't having it. He shoved the phone into her hands. "I know what's been going on. I saw everything." The look on Jade's face was a mix of guilt, anger, and something darker, fear. "Eli, it's not what you think," she started. But Eli wasn't listening anymore. He was done with the lies. "You betrayed me," he said, the words hitting her like a slap. "You betrayed us. All of it. Everything we built was nothing to you." Jade's eyes welled up with tears, but Eli was beyond the point of caring. The man who had loved her unconditionally was gone, and in his place stood someone who was done being manipulated, done being lied to. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could change what came next. Eli stood there, staring at Jade, the weight of the betrayal crashing down on him like a wave. The woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew better than anyone, had lied to him for months, not just once, but repeatedly. His heart had broken in ways he never imagined possible. But as the initial shock faded, something else began to stir inside him, a quiet, burning anger. But it wasn't just anger. It was a realization. He wasn't going to be the victim here. Not anymore. For weeks, Eli had been living in a fog. He tried to tell himself it wasn't true, that it couldn't be. But now, with the truth in front of him, something clicked. He wasn't the same man he used to be. The passive, soft-spoken guy who would never fight for himself had vanished. In his place stood a man who was ready to take control. The first thing he did was take care of himself. No more late-night takeout dinners. No more lazy afternoons in front of the TV, waiting for Jade to come home. He hit the gym hard, waking up early every day to work on his body, pushing his limits, getting stronger, more defined. He no longer wanted to be the guy who stayed home while his partner lived her exciting life. He was going to build a life of his own, one where he wasn't defined by someone else's choices. But physical transformation wasn't enough. Eli knew he needed more. He needed to regain his sense of self-worth. So he started focusing on his career. He dusted off the stories he'd put aside, the ones he'd abandoned in the wake of his emotional turmoil, and began writing again. He put himself out there, pitching his work to new publishers, landing a few offers. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose. But it wasn't just about improving himself. It was about reclaiming what he'd lost: his dignity, his confidence, and most importantly, his control. He'd spent so much time wondering why Jade had betrayed him, blaming himself, questioning what he could have done differently. But now he understood. The problem wasn't him. It was her. And he wasn't going to let her get away with it. The opportunity for revenge came sooner than Eli expected. He met Sophia, an intelligent, ambitious woman who worked at one of the publishing houses he had recently submitted his stories to. She was everything Jade wasn't: patient, understanding, and fiercely independent. When they started talking, there was an instant connection, a spark that Eli hadn't felt in a long time. They bonded over their love for literature, their shared passion for storytelling. It wasn't long before they began spending more and more time together, and Eli found himself looking forward to their dates, their deep conversations, their laughter. Sophia became the one person Eli could talk to about everything. The pain of Jade's betrayal, the anger he still carried, and the deep scars he hadn't known how to heal. She didn't judge him for his past. She simply listened. And that made all the difference. Jade had no idea what was coming. She thought she still had control over Eli. She thought she could keep him in her orbit, emotionally manipulating him, pretending like nothing had changed. But Eli wasn't the same man. He no longer cared about her excuses or her apologies. He knew exactly what he was going to do. Eli's revenge was never about violence or public humiliation. It wasn't about making Jade suffer in the way she'd made him suffer. No, his revenge was much more sophisticated. It was about taking back his power in the most painful way possible, by living a life she could never have. Jade had always been the one who dictated the terms of their relationship, setting the rules, making the decisions. But now it was Eli's turn. The first step of his plan was simple. He would pretend. He would keep up the act of the betrayed boyfriend, the one who still loved her, the one who wanted to work things out. He would smile when he saw her, give her just enough hope to make her believe they might reconcile. But behind the scenes, things were different. Eli began to make subtle moves. He started spending more time with Sophia, taking her to places he and Jade had once frequented, sharing intimate moments that Jade could only watch from a distance. He shared parts of his life with Sophia that Jade had once thought only belonged to her. He posted photos of them together, pictures of their dates, their travels, their inside jokes, and made sure Jade saw them. The silence from Jade's side grew louder. The desperate attempts to reach out, text messages, phone calls, were met with Eli's indifference. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't playing her game anymore. He no longer cared for her lies or her manipulations. Every time she tried to rekindle their connection, Eli's response was the same: calm, distant, and unwavering. Jade started to panic. She could see the changes in Eli. He wasn't the same man who had once followed her around like a puppy. He was stronger, more confident, and he had someone else in his life now. Someone who seemed to be everything she had failed to be. It wasn't long before Jade tried to confront him. She needed answers, needed to know why he was doing this, why he had moved on so easily. She couldn't bear to watch him slip through her fingers. The final confrontation happened at a high-profile business event, one that Jade had been eagerly anticipating for weeks. She had no idea that Eli was about to show up, looking every bit the man she never thought he could become. As the night wore on, Jade was surrounded by her colleagues and friends, but her attention kept flicking to the door. She knew Eli was there, somewhere, and she felt a pang of anxiety gnawing at her. Then, as if on cue, Eli appeared, walking through the doors with Sophia by his side. The room seemed to freeze. Eli walked up to Jade, his expression unreadable. "Jade," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of everything he had been holding inside. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Jade felt the blood drain from her face as Eli pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen, and suddenly, a stream of photos and messages filled the screen. Intimate photos of her and Cole, private conversations that she thought were hidden forever. The room went dead silent as Eli showed everyone the truth. Jade's face flushed with embarrassment and guilt, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before everyone she had worked so hard to impress. But Eli didn't stop there. He turned to her, his voice steady. "Don't worry, Jade," he said. "I've moved on. And you should too." With that, he walked away, leaving Jade in the middle of the room, exposed, humiliated, and defeated. The aftermath was swift and unforgiving. For Jade, the public exposure of her betrayal was a blow she never saw coming. She had always been in control of her life, pulling the strings in her relationships, and convincing herself that no one could ever truly hurt her. But now, in front of everyone at the event, Eli had shattered her illusions with surgical precision. The way he'd revealed her affair, so calculated, so confident, it left her breathless. Jade spent the rest of the evening in a haze. The whispers and stares followed her as she tried to compose herself, but it was no use. The facade was gone. No matter how hard she tried to explain herself, the damage had been done. Every word she uttered felt empty, like a desperate plea for forgiveness that no one was willing to grant. Her colleagues, her friends, they all saw her for what she truly was. A woman who thought she could have it all, only to lose everything. Jade tried reaching out to Eli, of course. It was her last-ditch effort to salvage whatever shred of dignity she could. But Eli wasn't interested in hearing her excuses anymore. When her messages went unanswered, she called him, her voice pleading. She wanted him back. She promised to change, to make things right. But deep down, she knew it was too late. Eli wasn't the same man who had once begged her to be honest, who had tried so hard to make things work. In the days that followed, Jade tried to make sense of everything. She went through the motions, attending work events, putting on a brave face, but inside, she was crumbling. She couldn't understand why Eli had turned his back on her so completely. She had expected some kind of reaction. Anger, sadness, perhaps, but not this. He had shown her that the love they shared meant nothing to him anymore, and that realization was a blow she wasn't prepared for. But what really hit her was the silence, the distance. Eli wasn't looking for a dramatic confrontation or a heated argument. He was simply moving on, and that, in its own way, was the greatest revenge. He was living a life without her, without any regret, and she couldn't stand it. For Eli, the days following the confrontation felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The emotional burden that had weighed him down for so long was gone. He had found his strength, not in revenge alone, but in reclaiming his life. Sophia had been a huge part of that transformation. While Jade had treated him like an afterthought, Sophia treated him like a person, like a partner, someone worthy of love and respect. They spent their time together enjoying the simple pleasures, coffee dates, long walks through the park, and nights where they could talk openly, without the secrets and lies that had plagued his relationship with Jade. But Eli wasn't naive. He knew he couldn't just forget the past. He couldn't forget the pain, the humiliation, or the betrayal. Yet, he also knew that he couldn't let it define him. He had to move forward. And in Sophia, he found someone who encouraged him to do just that. She supported him, cheered for his success, and treated him as if he were the prize, not the man who had been wronged. Sophia was different from Jade in every way. Where Jade had been self-absorbed, only concerned with her own needs, Sophia was selfless and understanding. Eli's life was beginning to feel like it had a purpose again, one that didn't revolve around fixing someone else's mistakes. He was finally living for himself. And when Eli's first novel was accepted by a major publisher, it felt like a full-circle moment. The man who had once been emotionally defeated, living in the shadows of Jade's world, was now standing tall in the light of his own accomplishments. He was thriving, professionally and personally. Sophia stood by his side through it all, their relationship growing stronger with each passing day. She was everything Jade had never been: genuine, loving, and supportive. With her, Eli realized that love wasn't about control, manipulation, or emotional games. It was about mutual respect, trust, and the freedom to be yourself without fear of being betrayed. Jade, meanwhile, was still living in the wreckage of her choices. Her attempts to reach out to Eli had failed, and soon the people around her began to distance themselves as well. Word had spread about her affair, and the shame of it hung over her like a cloud. Friends who had once admired her success now avoided her, unsure of how to act. It was a reality she had never imagined. A life without the power she once held, without the people she had taken for granted. She tried to focus on her career, but the passion she had once felt for her work had dwindled. She no longer cared about the promotions or the meetings. Every day felt like an uphill battle, a reminder of the life she had lost. No matter how many times she tried to tell herself that things would get better, she couldn't escape the nagging feeling that she had destroyed her chance at happiness. Her attempts to date again were met with failure. No one seemed interested in getting involved with a woman who had been exposed for her betrayal. The men she met were polite, but distant. They saw her as damaged, and no amount of makeup or high heels could cover up the truth. Jade had ruined her reputation, and now she had to live with the consequences. In the quiet moments, when she was alone, the truth finally sank in. She had thrown away the one person who truly cared for her. And for what? A fling that meant nothing? A man who had never truly been a part of her life? Now, Jade had nothing to show for it but emptiness. Sophia, ever patient and understanding, continued to be Eli's rock. She wasn't just a rebound. She was a partner in every sense of the word. She encouraged him to take risks, to chase his dreams, and to never look back at the mistakes of the past. She was the stability that Eli had longed for in his relationship with Jade, the emotional anchor he needed after everything he'd been through. Eli's bond with Sophia was deepening, and the more time they spent together, the more he realized how much better his life had become since Jade's betrayal. The love he had for Sophia was real, authentic, grounded, and free from the manipulation that had once defined his relationship with Jade. For the first time in years, Eli felt whole again. And Jade? She was left behind, a woman consumed by regret, watching from the sidelines as the man she had broken moved forward with his life. Better, stronger, and happier than she had ever known him. Eli had learned a valuable lesson through all of this. Betrayal can break you, but it can also rebuild you. Trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired, but it can be replaced with something stronger. Self-respect, independence, and the courage to move on. As for Jade, her journey was far from over. She had learned the hard way that actions have consequences. And though she tried to move on, the shadow of her past would always follow her. But for Eli, the future was bright. He had everything he needed now: love, success, and the peace of mind that came with knowing he had finally taken back control of his life. All right, folks, what do you think? Was Eli's revenge justified? Or was there another way he could have handled it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button for more shocking stories like this one. And don't forget to ring that bell so you're always in the loop with Unheard Stories. See you in the next one.